Welcome to the Trend Detection Podcast, powered by Siemens. And now your host, Niall Sullivan.
So hello, welcome to this episode of the Trend Detection Podcast. I'm really delighted that my regular guest or colleague, Nat Ford, is with me today. I don't think we've done one of these sessions for a while, the truth about predictive maintenance.
Yep.
Yeah, where we sort of dive into, well, it's pretty much unscripted. We're just talking about this. We come with a few ideas, but we're just sort of, what's in Nat's mind. So on that note, I think I'll hand over to Nat just to sort of introduce himself briefly and set the scene. Over to you, Nat.
Yeah, I'll introduce myself properly because I'm going to be a bit moany on this, so I'll have to take responsibility for who I am in case it gets litigious. So I'm Nathaniel. For those of you who listened before, you'll know I'm one of the business development directors for Senseye within Siemens, and previously a sales director when we were a startup before we were acquired. And as I always say in these sessions, that the reason that I think it's okay for me and people like me to pontificate about the truth about predictive maintenance is because we see the relationship from cradle to grave, or cradle to not grave, to continued relationship. So we meet clients right at the point when you as a marketing department start generating leads and contact and first conversations. And we track those relationships through all their highs and lows through to successful delivery of projects and scale. So we get to see all of the various stages, sort of headline, good stuff that comes out, but we're involved in all the negative stuff and the resolution of issues and the problem solving. So we experience a lot of the stuff that the clients do. So therefore, we can be a font of relatively biased, good knowledge about predictive maintenance. And I said at the beginning it was a bit moany. I think today, we talk about some of the topics we talk reoccur, and I'd like to talk today about what on earth do the people in the market think they're asking for. We go through waves of expectations with predictive maintenance. When I first joined the market, there were some reasonable expectations, and they went completely out of, stratosphere. People asking for stuff that you just can't do. I wouldn't want to do. We've talked about that on numerous occasions. But this kind of flights of fancy of what AI could do. Perhaps they're getting helped by third-party big systems integrators who are doing gap analysis and what I might call a fantasy gap analysis, because they're saying, we haven't got one of these things that hasn't been invented yet, but you crack on and put that in an RFP, and we'll see how many years of consultancy you can get. They've got a brilliant space in the market, and I don't want to denigrate them, but there are times when expectations get misaligned. So the conversation for me today should be, I want it to be, guys, be humble in your requirements. Aim for something reasonable that's going to be powerful and useful to you. Don't overfill your wish list, your shopping list with stuff that's just going to bog you down with years of assessing the market, only to discover that most of it doesn't exist yet and wouldn't be useful anyway. So that's the topic.
That's good. So let's reframe it from moody to constructive.
Yes,
people could take away, and key takeaways people could take away, which is good. But I think the good news is you've obviously been through it, Nat. You've talked to lots of different customers and prospects from different verticals and stuff. So well, let's start with that. Is it a broad issue? This isn't just one vertical or one country or whatever? Is it generally across the board?
It's across the board. It's random. You get a lot of companies who are very reasonable in their expectations, and then you get others who have had their expectations unreasonably set internally, externally. Who knows where these things get seeded from? But I guess the point that I'd like to sort of drill on or say to people at the beginning of a cycle is, as I said, be reasonable in what you're asking for. So, sometimes I feel like saying, why are we not enough? Why are we not enough? And what I mean by that, and we can go into the crass analogy of doctors, but my feeling from having spent a number of years engaging with clients and watching these solutions getting deployed, my feeling is that a really good system that reliably detects change that is probably going to lead to failure, gives some level of detail about what that is, sometimes lots of detail, sometimes no detail, but a system that can do that reliably, that your maintenance teams trust, that should be enough. You might go on to develop it to some fantastic other things, but don't start that process off by, I'll give you some examples of things people ask for. wanting a system that will tell you at any given stage the remaining useful life of any given asset is completely unreasonable a request. Or wanting a system that will, with 95% reliability, tell you when something's going to fail and why. You don't even need that. Like it's totally beyond the point. They're massively over defining a requirement. What they need is a humble system that reliably alerts them when they need to be alerted, raises their attention to things or what need looking at.
Yeah.
And I think that, we talked before about the ratios. The vast majority of things that happen that we detect haven't happened before and need a bit of subjective discussion and a bit of investigation. Everything beyond that becomes a sort of science experiment and doesn't add value. And I just want to make one more point about it before we sort of discuss back and forth. The analogy of here I am, looking out my window, and I live in a village. I think there's about 2,000 people here. And we had a new doctor who, actually the surgery's shut now, so the analogy doesn't hold, but we got a new doctor about 2 years ago. And the goal of that doctor is to have patients come in and discuss their ailments with them and to diagnose what their issues are and maybe recommend some medicine, etc. What his job is not to do, he's not supposed to come in and determine exactly when everyone's going to die and what they're going to die from and describe exactly how much time they've got left to live. What he should be doing is changing, not measuring that outcome, but changing it positively by understanding what the current state is and giving people sage advice on things they should do to change the broad spectrum of potential outcomes. So in my case, as a 51-year-old, the advice that he gave me was to stop eating butter and things like that because my cholesterol was high. He didn't work out when I was going to have a heart attack. He said that the likelihood of it was increasing because of my cholesterol. That's a fair statement. Now, if you take that analogy, it actually holds quite true across the balance of a plant. You want a system, you want a humble system that's good at assessing current behaviour of assets and keeping an eye on them and saying when things are happening to those assets that might indicate that broad spectrum of potential outcomes is shifting in a negative direction and you need to do something to change that. Not giving you exact details of remaining useful life, etc. So yeah, I think I like that analogy because it is correct. And I feel sometimes like when we talk about this central tenet, this idea of looking at current state of stuff and making small observations, that maybe we're underselling or we're missing the brief. But that's not correct. What we're doing is exactly right. We should not be going out and massively overselling the idea of remaining useful life and prognostics and an exact description of a failure mode and all the mitigating circumstances. There's a place for that. But in the whole, what we're trying to do is we're service across a balance of a plant. Right, there you go. I've waffled about it. I think I've set the scene.
You have set the scene. You have set the scene very well. It's just, yeah. I mean, it's actually where to start with all this because it's quite a lot to unpick, isn't it? But
Yes.
it's. I mean, my first question was really going to be. My first question was really going to be around like who's well, whether we want to place blame or fault. But how has this situation sort of occurred? I guess would be, what's your sort of view on that side of thing?
Are you feeling thick-skinned, Niall? I suspect.
I'm feeling this was coming.
It's a triad. There's three main influences, I would imagine. You can summarise into three main influences. There's the stuff that we affect, so the salespeople going out and overselling. Maybe they don't understand their products. Maybe there's some stuff which is easy to explain, yet less appropriate. It's a lot sexier to talk about remaining useful life and prognostics and all that stuff than it is to talk about raising your attention a bit. I think definitely marketing has a role to play in it. If you look at the gamut of organisations who do or claim to be in the predictive marketing space, I think the less attached to it they are by reality, the more at liberty they are to make bold, unreasonable claims and misset expectations. And that's not a big heinous thing. it just generally happens. If you're briefed as a marketing department to put together a campaign around the technology with an organisation, you're not going to do the most boring campaign you can. You're going to do the most attractive one you can, where you point at the salient benefits. And I suspect what's happened in this market is that the salient benefits of a very small proportion of the stuff we should be focused on is much more exciting than the salient benefits of what I would argue is the most important piece of it. So I think sales and marketing have had an impact on it. I also think that, just generally speaking, we've all had, and this will change because AI is accelerating exponentially, but I think previously we all had far too great expectations of AI. So you would have your normal life where there was the normal things that you would achieve, you'd expect from systems, and then if anything came along and had AI within it, then you thought you were going to, as we've said before, hover to work, have a disappearing cloak, I don't know, whatever, the sort of fantasy stuff. But it's all possible because it's AI. AI is amazing. It's going to change the world. So I think people were sort of given license to start fantasizing about what a solution might be able to do for them.
And you mentioned
measuring vendors against their fantasies.
I was going to say that term, I think, is also key. AI, often misunderstood, often overused. It's actually interesting because in our, let's say, marketing or sales approach, it's not something we overly, push. We don't push the technology and go, AI, machine learning first. It's like the outcomes first, which I always thought because obviously that's the most important thing. You don't question always use the mobile phone analogy. You don't mind what's in your mobile phone, what makes it work, as long as it works, right? So, but I'm also wondering now whether stuff like Gen AI is now having a similar effect. Even taking this even further now, as that starts to be introduced, that it sets expectations even further.
Yeah, I have that same concern. Because, until very recently, we had the liberty of not mentioning machine learning, not mentioning algorithms, not mentioning AI, not mentioning any of that in a sales engagement, because it's not relevant. It's the mechanism by which the stuff we do gets done, but it's not, you don't need to talk about, as you say, with the mobile phone. You don't need to know how the stuff works. You just need to know how to use the apps. It'd be kind of weird to assess the technology and use that as a basis of selecting the iPhone over some alternative. Yeah. But that's typically what happens with our technology. People think they need to get data scientists involved to validate it. Why you wouldn't do that with anything else? You wouldn't bring a car designer along to the forecourt when you're buying a car. They're very different ends, but one's B2C and it's proven technology. But whatever, it kind of holds true. But I think, I don't know why people do that. But on the challenge of people wanting to talk about the AI, I think it's partly because companies know they have a responsibility to see what's on the horizon and what's going to change the potential because they need to stay competitive. So with the chat stuff, I think it's easier for us all to understand because it's not murky magic. It's conversation. It's what we all do. It's something that it's AI attempting or aiming or set out by humans to do something which is in the vein of what we traditionally do. So it's slightly easier to see the effects it might have. I mean, take, for example, our platform. Let's not discuss it. Let's discuss it theoretically. I'll leave you to make announcements in the future.
Exactly.
Yeah. Any technology that has a user interface clearly could benefit from some kind of chat layer. It's a no-brainer. And I can see how that fact, coupled with flights of fancy, might give us a new wave of clients massively oversetting their own expectations about what's achievable. We will see, won't we?
Okay, I'm going to change into my work.
Well, I think it's what you're saying about RFP.
About that in the marketing space. What's the current sort of?
Yeah, no, I think we've seen competitors start to talk about it more and more, and I guess what's going to be harder to distinguish is it real? Is it something real, or is it just good marketing where let's tie it to this Gen AI topic because it's cool and in focus and everyone knows about it. So it's what will be interesting for me, not just talking from a Siemens perspective, but outside, is how much of what's being said it will turn out to be fruition and deliver what we said, business outcomes, not just here's a fancy little toy you can play within this app. It's actually what does it actually deliver to the end user. I think
Well,
that's
so that could be an important outcome from this conversation. So, I remember in the early 2000s when Microsoft launched .NET, and suddenly all IT departments were panicking. They didn't know enough about what it was or what it was going to change. Or was it something to do with the development platform? Was it something to do with the internet? And we would run sessions at the company I was working for at the time that would educate heads of IT, because they needed to know if they were going to get challenged by the board why they hadn't taken advantage of something that was new and emerging. So there will be pressure on people that we're engaging with to find ways, especially when we're speaking to people who are involved in selecting new technologies or horizon scanning. There'll be pressure on them to engage with companies. So we may go through another wave of this expectation. So the message that we should give to companies is, don't lose sight of what you were trying to achieve in the first place. If what you're trying to achieve is a reduction in downtime, don't get taken down some long corridor discussing LLM. If an organisation can show to you a benefit of using this technology with the conjunction of the service they provide, then crack on, use it. But if it's more flights of fancy stuff, then be wary of it. Stick to your core tenet. You're trying to reduce unplanned downtime. You're trying to have a better visibility of the need for maintenance of your fleet of assets. And if it's not augmenting that, then don't let it distract you. If it is augmenting that, get distracted.
Yeah. So maybe let's go down that theme a little bit. So in terms of all I'm comparing this to is like a typical RFP where, like you said, there's like, have you got this feature? Have you got that feature? So what should be on an RFP from your point of view, having seen a lot of these? What would make a perfect, and not perfect for us, but just being perfect in terms of helping a customer or potential customer to get the solution that suits their organisations and suits their challenges, I guess. Maybe I don't have time for everything, but
if I had to go and if I changed roles suddenly and I was working for a company and I had to produce an RFP for them to select a predictive maintenance provider, I would try and keep it really tight. I'd want to know that so 3 areas: the technology. I'd want to know that it was reliable at good detection of change that might lead to movement in the broad spectrum of outcomes, as we discussed before. And I'd want to put some metrics in about that reliability, not percentages, etc., but some things around usage, proven reduction or increase in uptime. I can't make this stuff up on the fly, but I keep it simple. Yeah. But it would be about that core tenet. I would include some mention of the ability, where there was known failures, etc., to look for specific things like failures, but not for that to become an onerous central scaffold of the venture, but something that it could evolve to where appropriate. Same with diagnostics and prognostics. I'd actually be more concerned about the ability for a company to provide a platform for delivery, to actually have some ability to either work with you or show you what you need to do to deliver, own, evolve the solution over time. That can be missing in swathes. So that would be as important. And then the end user piece, about the multiple modes of interaction, etc. So technology, deployability, and usability, but keeping it tight, keeping it humble. We're talking about a solution for some people who are already busy, who want an additional strand of information to feed into their day-to-day discussions, to their stand-ups, to whatever their process is. Additional strands of information that help them make good decisions in a timely manner, and to start to have an impact on the way they run their maintenance. There's one thing I'd be aware of is any RFPs that start addressing cultural change, that old route. as I've said before, this is my personal opinion, but I don't think that anybody selling a predictive maintenance solution should be getting into the business of talking about changing culture. It's just it's a technology solution. Over time, you will see the changes in behaviour, but not at a cultural level. Not, yeah. So keeping it simple. Don't overweight the things which are fun, exciting, easy to describe, but not as important. Accurate prediction of failures. We've talked about all the stuff before, but I just, my call to the market is keep it really simple. You can once companies have bought a solution and they've invested in it and they've implemented it and they've got a small handful of people in the business who are invested in it, then they'll become the experts. So then they can determine exactly what's the art of the possible is, and they can go off and make demands of vendors and ask to be on steering committees to feedback on product roadmaps, etc. But don't do it in the beginning when you're still buying. Be guided, keep it simple.
And I guess just as we sort of come towards the end, I guess, but is it also to be careful? So if a customer's been through previous, let's say, attempted deployments or failed deployments, if you want to call it that, but don't be scarred by that, because maybe that's a reaction to some failed projects before that, we need to add even more questions this time to to make sure none of these things fall through the gaps, I guess, as well. It's learning from failure, but not being, let it sort of dominate your thinking too much, maybe something like that.
Yeah, we know that for us, our best projects and clients come from that unfortunate group of companies who've tried this stuff before and failed. The reason they make their best clients is that there's a whole bunch of things which have already been understood and appreciated. Terminology, a lot of the expectation setting stuff, but also they've kind of crashed into some of the problems that people wouldn't necessarily predict whilst they're doing their fantasy gap analysis. I think you're right that maybe that will make them be even more demanding, but actually I think that's offset against the fact that they've realised what the challenges are and they're better placed to deal with them this time around. So you can have it's like meeting I don't know, cousins who have similar knowledge to you, so you can share. There's usually within those organisations there'll be somebody who was previously a sponsor of that process, and they've got battle scars, but they've also got much more refined chat about the whole topic, and they tend to understand that you need a bigger project team, etc. So I think I don't think that necessarily poses a challenge. I think they would probably be in that situation better at understanding the need to pare this down and do the central stuff well.
No, exactly. Yeah, I've sort of framed that in a negative sense, but you're right. It's actually a positive because, again, when talking to you and the others in the team, and you're saying, I think we should do it this way, then because they've already been through it and maybe know that the other way doesn't work, then they're more likely to say, well, actually, yeah, I know that doesn't work doing it that way. So yeah, I can see why that makes sense, I guess. But, and so, yeah, so in terms of like final thoughts, that you sort of summarised it a little bit before, and the key takeaways, I guess, again, is keep it simple, right? Like I said, keep your requirements simple. Don't overthink it. Don't overload it with requirements. Just think about the business outcomes and what you want out the other side, right?
Yeah, don't overthink it. Assume that it is enough to have that core central set of requirement. Don't overthink the art of the possible. You can do that later on when you're better versed, but keep it simple. If your project is about reducing downtime, then allow an organisation to come in and do that in a sensible way. As I said at the beginning, with reliable cases with low change. One thing we didn't mention, and I would add as a takeaway, is don't. Remember, this is a people solution. It requires people to look at this stuff and be subjective, make decisions in the same way that you do currently. Don't aim to have a bells and whistles solution which automates everything to the point of ordering spares, for example. We're not there yet. You might have a use case where you can do it specifically for one type of asset, but if you're looking, as you should be, at a layer of predictive maintenance as a methodology across your balance of your environment, keep it simple, keep it people-based, and then grow over time.
Yeah.
Certainly make our lives a lot easier.
Well, it's about making everyone's lives on all sides, I guess. But I think actually that's an interesting next episode for us, because I know we have talked about previously. Like I said, a lot of these themes do recur, but in terms of like the sponsor's role, but maybe we could expand that to just the people role side, the human side of this, and the importance of the human input, which I think we can take into another episode. But I guess for now on that, thank you again for your time and your thoughts.
That's right. Let's do PDM people.
PDM people. It wasn't too moany as well. Well, moany, constructive. It was constructive, I'd say. Hopefully everyone agrees out there. But no, thank you for your time again, and thank you everyone for listening. We'll see you on the next episode.
Speak to you again. Bye.
Thank you all.
Please like and subscribe on all major podcast channels, and find out more about Senseye Predictive Maintenance at Siemens.com.